death, taxes, and getting screwed by Vail Resort's deferred lift maintenance. All that and more coming up on today's episode of How Badly Can Big Corporate Screw Up a Ski Resort? Welcome to The Hater's Guide to Skiing Park City. Now, I would love to dive headfirst into the fiasco that led to that opening line, but I want to build a little suspense first. So let's start with the town. Park City is arguably a world-renowned mountain town. I mean, the town is busy as hell, somehow worse even than Breckenridge, but somehow tries to carry the attitude of Aspen. That's what happens when you mix the uber-rich with a giant independent film festival. In fact, the festival doesn't even need to be in town for it to feel like it is. But don't worry, they've finally managed to get rid of it. Instead, that absolute monolith of chaos is headed to the town where I live, because Boulder apparently wasn't crazy enough. Dear Boulder PD and City Council, if you thought the $1.4 million of bike thefts annually was a lot to handle, wait until you see the anarchy Sundance brings. I mean seriously, who thought this was a good idea? Now, if I know anything about Park City, it's that the town and the mountain's operator, that being Vail Resorts, don't get along particularly swimmingly. Park City itself is one giant amalgamation of one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the West, an iconic upper mountain, a giant amusement park, and whatever the hell this is, all held together by a couple low-capacity gondolas and the power of friendship. Vail actually tried to make it all better at one point, but I guess the town decided it was being too logical, so they blocked it and forced Vail to propose not one, but two gondolas and canyons that are going to have the same effect as handing a drowning man a rubber duck. First of all, we've got the Sunrise Gondola because, sure, just one more out-of-base gondola will surely help the mid-mountain lift lines where they're the worst and most consistent. Okay. But then, on top of that, you want to replace the cabriolet with a gondola. So basically replacing an open-air standing gondola with a scratched-up plexiglass enclosed sitting gondola, but for $30 million. That's like spending $30 million to replace a preserved Loire Valley castle with a Soviet-style apartment building. I guess the cabriolet cars were too scary for the trust fund babies who fly in from the East Coast to really rough it in a Verbo. And that last bit brings up a whole different point, but I don't even want to go there in this video because I might genuinely explode if you make me start talking about short-term rentals. One of the most iconic photos involving the cabriolet is not of the cabriolet itself, but of Park City's ski patrollers on strike underneath it. But honestly, that was in the past, and it's not even worth my energy to roast it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch Peak Rankings' video about it. As I said in the intro in the Park City how we would fix it, Vail Resorts' Park City team is so insufferable that they seem to be the only ski company that can start a nationwide labor movement. I suppose that applies to Vail Resorts as a whole, but it's so ironic that it happened at Park City, where the usual complaints are limited to the limo's air conditioning and the horribly long quarter-mile walk to the ice cream shop. Now, this isn't Vail Resorts' fault, but Canyons is an absolute mess navigationally. They built the whole ski area around these billionaires' houses, and now we're struggling to connect everything without insane lift lines because of it. I mean seriously, I feel dyslexic when I look at the colony on the trail map. It's like heavenly on crack. This is what happens when real estate comes first. Maybe Deer Valley and Powder Mountain could learn a thing or two. But of course they won't, because the rich people seem to think there's still too much of the riffraff skiing at their mountain. Alright, let's speed it up just a little bit. See, Park City has a lot of beginners because it's such a popular vacation destination, but for some reason, Vail Resorts thinks it's a good idea to have this open. There's a run called Flying Salmon, but I prefer to refer to it as Dead Salmon. I never thought I'd find a hike too blue, but here we are. But surely it's worth it, right? Nope. All you get is more flat road through the trees. The lift line section writes itself, so instead, let's focus on the crowded trails. It wouldn't be a Vail Resort without its own version of School Marm, and for that we have Home Run. It's long like the Marm, busy like the Marm, it's just straight Marmon. I could easily mistake it for the Marm, but even the Marm of Park City is better than sitting there with your life withering away on the town lift. And of course Vail has to go and pick yet another fight with the town, this time about that ancient bucket of bolts, because I guess it's just in their DNA. And finally, it just wouldn't be a ski resort without some absolute clown littering in these beautiful woods.
Come on, man.
Alright, so you've stuck with me this far. Let's finally wrap this whole thing up in a nice bow by discussing the Great Tombstone debacle. See, on the trip we got all this footage, we were there for a week. So on the second day of the trip, we're riding up the Tombstone lift at about noon after having already waited in the standard 30-minute line for it. About halfway up, it stops for about 20 minutes. When we get off at the top, they give us drink vouchers, which was admittedly a nice touch. They tell us the lift's closed, and on Twitter write that it's down for an hour for a shift change. It ended up being closed for the rest of the day. Not a big deal, complications happen. No problem so far. The next morning we get up and look at the lift report. It says Tombstone is expected. Once the mountain opens, we check again and it says Tombstone is on hold. All of this is pointing to a mid-morning reopen, right? So we go to canyons. I don't know why we did it. I know better than to take swings, especially when it comes to Vail-operated mountains. But by midday, it's now been 24 hours on this 1-hour closure since they have given 0 updates since that initial piece. In fact, they list Peak 5 and 9990 as open and very explicitly state that everything is still accessible. So somebody in the comments more familiar with Park City, explain to me how they figured that. Because by my math, they were trying to say that everything was accessible if you took an hour-and-a-half hike up. On day 3 of the closure, it again started the day as expected, then on hold. About 48 hours after the initial stop, we finally see some movement and the lift reopens late that afternoon. 48 hours with 0 communication, but with the mountain info people vehemently defending that all terrain is still accessible. See, I have no issue with lift breakdowns. It happens. What I have a problem with is the lack of transparency, or quite frankly, the straight-up deception they did. Vail knew that if they said Tombstone was closed for maintenance, then people would go to Deer Valley for the day. Average Joe wanted to ski 9990, but when he sees that Tombstone is down, he heads to the snow basin for the day instead. So thus, Vail tricks Average Joe by telling him it's expected, or that it's just on hold. Average Joe spends his time and money to visit a dysfunctional mountain, not because he willingly went to said dysfunction, but because he was told that it would probably be fixed. Do you now understand why I have a bone to pick with Vail and Park City? This whole story, it ruined about 1.5 ski days, and that made my trip pretty awful. So now, just imagine how it felt to the people who had 6, 7, or 8 day trips ruined by the patrol strike due directly to Vail's incompetence. You don't understand the pain until you're in the situation. People talk about the Deer Valley difference, and if you ski both, you really will notice it. Sure, Deer Valley is getting better, but the true reason why you feel the difference is that Park City is getting worse. At the end of the day, one of the mountains is a Swiss watch. The other one is a fire truck on fire. I'll let you decide which is which. All my love, I'm out.